Hi, I'm John DeDakis, and you're one to one with me. And I'm one to one with Steve Rubino. Steve Rubino is a trial attorney. He's a practicing attorney who's filed the first civil racketeering case against the Catholic Church all the way back in 1993. And for the last 35 years, he's represented thousands of abuse survivors throughout the United States, North America, the Canadian Arctic. He's lectured extensively on the intricacies of the cover up and how America's Catholic bishops have hidden sexual predators in plain sight. For 17 years, Steve was the chairman of the Childhood Sexual Abuse Litigation Group of the American Association for Justice, and he's written a novel, Act of Faith. It's his debut novel, and it takes a look behind the curtain of the global sexual abuse scandal. Hi, Steve. It's good to have you here on One to One. How are you?
I'm well. It's great to be with you, John. It's good to see you as well.
It's good to see you. And I suppose full disclosure, um, you are a practicing attorney, so you know about the concept of putting people on a retainer. You put
Yep,
me on a retainer
I did
as your writing coach. We met in Vermont probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I think,
6 years ago.
and you took one of my writing classes
I took a workshop that you were giving at a bookstore in Manchester, Vermont,
in Manchester, right? The
Northshire.
Northshire bookstore,
Yep.
and you were, one of my standout students, and you were already working on this novel. Am I right?
Well, I had an outline, and I didn't really know what the process was. I knew the story I wanted to tell. Well, I knew parts of it. Um, and my wife saw the ad for the workshop, and I said, I should go to this. And I met you.
And obviously, this is not an advertisement for my writing workshops, but did you come away with a better sense of how to go about tackling this project?
I did. It was still not as clear as I wanted it to be, and it wasn't until I actually decided to call you up and send you an outline and have somebody for the first time actually react to it, uh, to give me some idea as to what it takes to put a three generation story. I mean, I had the story outline in a sense, but I didn't know what the mechanics were to put characters together, to have dialogue be talked by a female, written by a male. That whole learning curve was steep,
Mhm.
and it took 4 years to get it from outline to in print.
And what would you say was the hardest part about becoming a novelist?
The hardest part, I think, the hardest part for me was the confidence that I had as a trial lawyer, translating that to a completely different field that I really knew nothing about. And that confidence that came from my prior work into, okay, I can say this is good, but it took me a long time to convince myself and a lot of beta readers to support that belief that this was something that I wanted the public to see.
Tell me about the concept of beta readers.
Um, I was first introduced to it by an author friend, Jason Berry, who wrote "Lead Us Not into Temptation." And "Lead Us Not into Temptation" is a book that it's a character in Act of Faith. The book is actually a character in Act of Faith.
Mhm.
And the reason is it was the first volume that was written back in the early 90s about the scandal. And it was the scandal that happened involving Gilbert Gothea, it's a priest in Louisiana. Jason was a beat investigative reporter. He broke the story. on the Vatican cover-up and Tom Doyle blowing the whistle, who was at the time working in the Vatican. And he told a story about a family that went through this process. And I probably bought about 200 copies of that book and gave them away to clients, because when I would see the clients, and they were coming into the office thinking that they were the only people that had gone through this. This was so shocking to them that they just couldn't fathom that they were part of a community. And in order to give them some emotional sideboards, I gave them Jason's book to read, because it explained the scandal. It explained the complicity of the hierarchy. And it explained the issues behind what families go through when they're visited by this type of toxicity.
And this has been pretty much your life work. And so writing it as fiction, was that freeing to be able to do that?
It was necessary.
Okay, there's a difference.
There is a big difference. When I first, let me go back to 2016, right before I met you. I was in Vero Beach, and I was visiting a friend's house, and the movie Spotlight came on, and I had not seen it. And to be perfectly honest, I had avoided it because I didn't want to see it. I was working in Boston at the time. I knew all the players. I knew the story. I had cases involving the Archdiocese of Boston. And in 2016, I was really burnt out by this material. And there was a group of us there. We all decided, okay, you got to watch this. So I watched it. And I was stunned by it, because it was not only a really good movie, I was stunned by what it didn't cover. It was a journalism movie, a movie in the spirit of or the genre of All the President's Men. It was an absolutely top shelf movie in that regard. But I didn't think it told the stories of the families, the grandparents, of the parents, of the brothers and sisters, and how this type of sexual assault early on in a person's life infiltrates their entire personality until the day they die. And that was the story that I decided almost at that moment, because I was getting urgent. The fellow that I was with was a trial lawyer himself, and he knew what I had been doing for the last 30 years. And he said, you ought to write about this. And so I came back and I started making some notes, and I went into our file room, and for the first time, it's kind of a crazy story, but during the California cases back in around 2008, 9, 10, within like 18 months, 3 critical people in my office died of cancer. My partner, my legal assistant for 30 years, and our lead associate. So I was kind of relatively naked as far as being able to handle these cases. So that's when I decided that I needed to punch out and see if I could associate with another firm that had labor, because it was just impossible to start and create that learning curve with those 3 people missing out of the organization, and me be outside of the office handling cases, doing mediations, getting ready for trial, and traveling all over the country. So I ended up, just doing other things. Well, in 2016, after I had seen the movie, I decided that I was going to try and do something about it. And I went into our old cold files in storage, and I found 6 boxes of notes that my secretary, Carol, who was passed by then,
Mm.
stripped out of every file that I had ever handled. And these were notes that were in bus stations and train stations and on little pink paper message slips and all kinds of ephemera, that I doodled on, and where I was going, who I was going to talk to, impressions that were made during the trips. And as each file closed, she did all the closing documents, got the clients their money. But what she did, and I had no idea until I found it, she had stripped out all of my personal notes about every case that I had been working on, labeled them, and put them in a box. And by the time she was finished, there was 6 banker's box on my desk.
And how did that influence the writing process?
What it did was it gave me the arc of the personalities that I had been involved with. And I was able to construct a 3-generation story of how this, and I call it toxicity, how this toxic assault ran through families and implicated different aspects of their relationships with each other, their intimate relations with their spouses or boyfriends or girlfriends, and the people that were involved, the law enforcement, the judges, the defense attorneys, the other lawyers that were doing this kind of work. And I mean, these were people that basically came to life in my head. And then I took basically my upbringing as an Italian Catholic, cradle Catholic, went to primary Catholic school, Catholic high school, Catholic college, Catholic University Law School. I mean, I was like Catholic out. And I knew what had happened to me, which was nothing. And I compared that to what I had seen over the last 30 years. And then the story came together for me, and the personalities came together for me.
When the stories first started coming out and when people started talking to you about it, I mean, you say you were Catholic out. I mean, you were very immersed in the Catholic Church, had never experienced any of this kind of abuse. So were you skeptical at first? Was this just too awful to believe? I mean, what were your first reactions?
My first reaction was I didn't believe it. And more to the point, it was almost from a family member. It was my wife's best friend from grade school, sister. And I knew Helen's best friend very well, and I knew she wasn't going to send some quack down to see me. And the mother came down. She told me the story, and I'll never forget what I said to her. I said, "Listen, I don't know what happened, but I can tell you what you just described to me could not have happened. Those priests are celibate. I know that. I know that from my training, my background, and it's ludicrous for me to even listen in these headphones those words, but that's what I said. And I'm a pretty quick study. I found out that there was a police investigation, and I found out that it happened, and it happened exactly the way she said it. And the priest was tried and convicted and went to prison.
What year would that have been?
That was in 1986, 7 area, somewhere in that area.
But one priest does not a scandal make, right? It
doesn't. But here's what happened. After he was convicted, I said, and I was working as a lawyer doing medical negligence cases, and my senior partner came over to me and said, "What are you going to do with this?" I said, "I don't know. I'm going to write him a letter and ask for money." So I did. And I put a number on the letter that was absurd. And a week or so later, I got a phone call. And they said, fine. So what do you mean fine? What do you mean fine? Nobody says fine. She said, well, you demanded this amount of money and we're going to pay it. I said, just like that. And he said, yeah. I said, all right. So,
but that's not necessarily an admission of guilt. That's just to make it go away.
No, it's not an admission of guilt. But here's the other shoe that dropped. I had to put the claim through what's called in New Jersey called a friendly settlement. So I had to go into open court in front of a judge, explain what happened, explain how the money was going to be distributed between the parents and the child. Parents had a claim as well. And he has to approve it. And he has to approve how it's actually distributed to the plaintiff, the youngster. We put it into a structured settlement and proved up all the guarantees to make sure it was safe so that as he grew older, it would be there for him. And it got mentioned in the Philadelphia Inquirer. And I mean, a mention, I mean, like a line or two mentioned deep into the paper. And another person called, same perpetrator. And long story short, same result, same timing. And that's when I knew I had fallen into something that was much bigger than I was. And I have not done anything else since that day.
I mean, it basically fell into your lap.
It did. It was serendipity.
And so explain the whole civil racketeering angle, because this is basically accusing the Catholic Church of being mobsters.
Well, yes and no. At the time I filed the lawsuit, we were probably 20 or so, 30 or so cases into the scandal. I had talked to a lot of people around the country, and the racketeering civil statute helps in a situation where there is a criminal enterprise. Now, it's hard to put criminal enterprise and Catholic Church in the same sentence.
Right.
There's a lot of resistance to that. There was resistance from me. In fact, I took the people that I had identified as sexual predators in the Diocese of Camden. I took that list and I took the evidence that we had to the FBI and the Atlantic County Prosecutor's Office in a meeting in Linwood, New Jersey. And John, if I tell you that they looked at me like I had 6 heads, maybe they looked at me like I had 8 heads.
Oh, man.
And nothing happened. Probably the more interesting part about it is the very people that I identified in 1992 were identified by the Diocese of Camden in 2020 as sexual predators. And that has since led to a bankruptcy filing, but that's a different story. The racketeering applies simply because if you have a protocol in your administration with the parishioners to keep them away from any type of scandal, to cover up any type of scandal, and if that scandal involves a felonious sexual assault of a minor, that is a crime. And if that enterprise is consistently acting like that, they are engaged in racketeering activity because their whole purpose was to keep these cases from seeing the light of a courthouse. Some of these cases were minors, some of these reports that went in to the diocese was when these children were still underage, and you have a year and a half to 2 years from the time they reach majority to file a lawsuit. If they get it past that point, the case is gone. Statute of limitations has expired, and the case cannot be brought. And my contention in the civil lawsuit was that a lawsuit is personal property. The law requires the injury, the criminal enterprise has to injure personal property, a property interest. And a lawsuit is a property interest. It's a legal expectancy if you prove up your case. And if you're prevented from doing that, and the underlying crime is either fraud or sexual assault, there's enumerated crimes that are inside the statute. And I know this is, we're really in the criminal or the weeds on the racketeering statute, but that's how it worked. The case was, my lead plaintiff on the case was a Roman Catholic priest who was sexually assaulted when he was a youngster in the diocese that he was applying for, and he reported it. And case was ultimately settled right before the complaint was to be served.
The Catholic Church coughed up some money.
Yep.
A lot of money?
A lot of money.
And this was the beginning of the scandal blowing up, basically.
Yeah. It blew up and kind of like a rolling thunder. It blew up. It blew up in the late 90s. It blew up again in 2002. Blew up again in 2010, 11.
I want to go back to what you talked about in terms of growing up in the Catholic Church. I mean, you were an altar boy.
I was.
You were.
I was actually an altar boy at the shrine, where a lot of the book is set.
Right.
At the.
And did you consider becoming a? Did you actually consider becoming a priest ever?
No.
Okay.
No.
What?
My mother did.
Okay. Of course. Tell me, what effect did this whole scandal have on your own personal faith? I'm assuming you're no longer a practicing Catholic.
I am not.
What are you?
I am, well, there's a line in the book that says, it takes just as much faith to believe in God as to not believe in him.
Ah.
And I'm on the other side of that.
You would consider yourself an atheist now?
Yeah.
Because of what you've experienced?
Well, there's yes, and because of a conversation that I relate through characters in the book that I had with the actual the Vatican whistleblower, a fellow named Tom Doyle. So at the time, we had just had our youngest child, and in my family, children get christened. Well, it just happened to be about the same time that one of the bishops from the pulpit labeled me the new wave of terrorism, called me a terrorist.
Jeez.
So things weren't particularly happy in the Rubino household at the time. My parents were still alive, and I have a lot of family, and there you have it. My wife is saying, "Is our youngest going to get christened, or what? What's the deal?"
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in the middle of a case somewhere, but I end up at the Oak Bar in the Plaza Hotel with Tom Doyle, and conversation kind of went this way. He says he wanted to know how I was doing, first of all, and I said, "Well, not the best." He said, "Try not to worry about any of this because it's going to pass." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, religion came. He said, well, first of all, he said, "How old do you think the planet is?" I said, "Tom, come on. I don't know." billions of years old. I don't know. He says it's around 5 or 6 billion years old. And he says, how many years do you think we've been walking upright? Something a little bit after Cro-Magnon, but we had a thumb and we were hunter gatherers and we were walking upright. I said, Tom, anthropology wasn't my strong suit in college. I said, I don't know, a couple 100,000 years. He says, probably around 500,000, give or take. He says, where do you think God was between 500,000 and 6 billion? It's like on vacation. Where was he? What was he doing? What was happening? We know the planet was here. Just decide one day, we're it. And he said something I will never forget. That religion came to the planet because nobody could understand thunder and lightning. And it was based on fear. And anybody that could explain to the masses their fears was powerful. And that's how it all started. So I said, well, that's great. You're a Roman Catholic priest. You work at the Vatican. And you're talking about thunder and lightning. And that was...
Let me just stop you for a second, because wasn't fear one of the strongest techniques that a pedophile priest would use?
Absolutely.
In order to maintain that abuse mentality and relationship?
No, to maintain the secrecy.
Right.
How did they keep the secret for so long?
Mm-hmm.
You know, when your product is eternal salvation, think about it. If you do X, you get it. If you do Y, you don't. And if for any reason you believe the messenger, you're in trouble. You are compromised.
But let me again just stop you, because the things that the priests were making these kids do, the kids must have known instinctively this is wrong. So how do I mean?
No, it's not.
No, not as simple as that. I mean,
it's not as simple as that. I mean, one of the things that I actually saw was the impact of grooming. And when a child is told that they are so special that God wants them to do this with their priest, that makes them special.
I see.
That makes them sacred. And resistance to that, the anger about doing it when it becomes really invasive and there's resistance, that's when the fear comes out. That's when the threats come out, where you'll be disowned. And when you tell a child they'll be disowned, it's bad. But when you tell a child that they will never be believed, it's worse. Because then they're completely isolated. And that's how they did it.
Right. So we're talking, just to get back, I got us off track, but you were talking about how, religion basically got started by explaining fearful things. And my question, and I think you were in the process of answering, is how does one go from being steeped in Catholicism to becoming an atheist?
Well, it was actually easy for me, because I had totally believed the hierarchy. I mean, I revered them. I thought they were special. I thought priests were special. I thought celibacy, I didn't know what I thought about celibacy, but I knew that I wasn't going to practice it. But anybody that could is a special person. And when I became, without going to school, a real student of canon law. And I found out that celibacy had to do with property, and the church is losing property to priests that were married that had children. So it was simple. If you are celibate and you have children, they're bastards. They can inherit anything. Mm-hmm. So your property would be going to the church. So I I had no idea about that. I mean, but it's a historical fact, and it's been written about by much smarter people than me. But when you say going from a cradle Catholic to an atheist, it was actually quite simple because I looked at what was happening in front of me. I looked at the way in which children were treated. Children were not the constituency of the Catholic bishops, and they should have been. So if they were not the constituency of the Catholic bishops, how could the cover-up of those crimes be in any way associated with Catholic dogma or this is the one true apostolic religion? And it wasn't, and it isn't. And
but the Catholic Church isn't the only game in town. There are a lot of religions, and there are certainly a lot of religions that don't necessarily preach fear, but they preach love and redemption and things like that. So it need not be, going from cradle Catholicism to atheism. Aren't there a lot of stops along the way?
well, there are some stops along the way, but for me, I didn't know another religion. I knew power, I knew sex, and I knew how that corrupted men and women. It didn't really matter to me what religion. You talk about cults, you talk about the Jewish religion with their private courts when this happened. I mean, there's abuse to go around all religions, but as far as I can see, the Catholic hierarchy institutionalized the cover-up of this abuse in their canons, in the way they ran the church, and it's historical fact. I mean, the real itch in the book is there's a big, long legal discussion, actually argument, where the characters are saying, how is it possible that grand jury after grand jury has uncovered criminal evidence of cover-up, of complicity in the sexual assaults of children by transferring known sexual offenders to different parishes where they would reoffend? How is it possible that we have that evidence and organized religion still maintains its tax exemption? How's that possible? How do you put those two together? And this is one of the storylines that goes through this book, because Bob Jones University lost its tax exemption because it racially discriminated against biracial couples for 10 years and was affirmed by the United States Supreme Court. They got it back, but they cleaned their act up. So this is a complex story.
Has the Catholic Church cleaned up its act?
No. They haven't. My definition of cleaning up their act is full disgorgement of every single document that bears on abuse allegations of minors. That's where we start. Step 2 is, who are the people that are alive that participated in that? Step 3, they got to be removed. Step 4, in my world, they lose their tax exemption.
Are you in any way optimistic that any of those goals will be realized?
Well, no. I don't think there is if you look at the state of politics in our country now, you would have to say no. but you asked me early on in preparation for this, did I want to read something? And there is actually something in the very front of the book that was written by the editorial board of the National Catholic Reporter that I think bears repeating, if
Okay.
I may.
You may.
It says, we know now that the abuse crisis in the church is systemic, that it occurs across cultural boundaries, that its principal hallmark is cover-up, enabled by clerical and hierarchical cultures that had, over the centuries, become enclaves of privilege and secrecy, a world that saw itself as ontologically different from the rest of humanity and beyond accountability.
I want to
That is
show.
the
Go ahead.
nut in the nutshell.
Yeah. I want to show the cover because you had this painting that is used on the cover as
Yes.
you commissioned it. Explain the cover and how that came about.
Well, I didn't commission it.
Oh, okay.
One of my partners in the California cases was Terry Giles. Terry's wife is Callie O'Malley, and she's a trial lawyer herself. And she was, watching what we went through from the beginning of the California cases. And she knew an artist in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, and she drew out a sketch of her concept of the state of play, in a sense, of these cases. And this was the result of that sketch as executed by an incredibly talented artist.
And it's, how do you interpret it? What does it say to you? What does it show?
The first thing I said about that was the faceless minstrel of doom. That was my first thought that filtered into my head. The faceless entity is so powerful in my mind because the cover-up was so secret. We never knew who was orchestrating it or where they were being orchestrated. And I just think it says everything about the book Act of Faith, that cover. How do you interpret it?
Well, it was that Pied Piper kind of thing, but faceless, right? And the facelessness of it is suggests anonymity. It suggests secrecy, and there's something missing. There are a lot of secrets, a lot of things that are unknown, a lot of mystery. The word doom certainly. It with the storm cloud kind of background, it's very powerful, and it's the kind of thing that you can look at for a long time and think about. Based on, I mean, the book is not, it has just been released. What kind of reaction are you? I mean, are there a lot of Catholics that are just incensed at you that you would have the nerve to damage their church? I mean, what kind of reaction are you getting?
No, I think, to be honest with you, John, I think we're way past that. The church has damaged its church. I mean, it didn't need my help to damage it. They're perfectly capable of destroying their own church by their behavior. But to answer your question directly, no, I have, and quite frankly, I have never gotten any kind of blowback from Catholics about this. It's kind of like, should guns be sold at carnival shows without some background checks? I mean, the vast majority of the country say, no, you really shouldn't do that. And the vast majority of Catholics are saying, this should have been taken care of long ago.
Right. Tell me a little bit about the publication process, because publishing has changed incredibly
Yeah.
in the 15 years since I've been published. I mean, I have an agent. I'm published traditionally,
Right.
but long gone are the days where, you know, the only portal to getting published is through an agent and one of the big, you know, publishing companies. You know,
Yeah.
self-publishing has come along. Now independent publishing has come along, so that, you know, you can pitch, you know, a small publishing house directly and get published and bypass a lot of the, you know, so-called elites in New York.
Hmm.
What was your process or your avenue toward publication? How did that all come about?
Well, I followed your lead, and I bought, I think, what's the name of it, the index to agents.
There are a couple of there are a couple of directories on finding
Directories. It was
literary agents, right?
and I pushed out probably several hundred query letters uniformly
Yeah.
and quickly got rejected.
Right. Well, of
Um,
course, that's part of the process.
that's part of the process. And I had access to a couple of publishers, and I went at them directly, and basically the same result.
Mm.
And it was frustrating beyond belief, because I had been giving parts of this manuscript to, geez, by the time we finished, probably well over 100 people, some of which I knew, some of which I didn't, and I was not getting the same feedback from them. This, you know, this is like incredible. This is exactly how it happened. This is how I feel about this.
And what were they saying? What were the, you know, what were the gatekeepers saying?
The gatekeepers were saying the field has been plowed. And I think that they were talking about first person abuse accounts and Spotlight. Many of them mentioned Spotlight.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, Spotlight wasn't a book, first of all. It was a series of newspaper articles written by Mike Brzezinski and his team at the Boston Globe. It was a movie, for sure. And I got a lot of curious feedback. I had one person say, there's a lot to like here, but it was always the but. Now, I don't know whether they're just trying to get rid of me. Probably they were. I mean, here's the thing. I had no business writing a book to begin with. That's
Why?
not
What
who
do you mean?
that's not who they're looking at. They're looking at proven authors.
Mm.
They're looking at the financial aspects of trying to deal with the supply chain, ink, paper, marketing. All those costs mount up.
And you're a nobody.
I'm a nobody. I am proficient in my
Yeah,
field.
but you're not totally a nobody, because
Well, that's what I thought. But
not only was the ground plowed, you planted the seeds.
well, yeah, and I was working the plow on a lot of those cases. So I thought that was going to be my end. Well, I was wrong. And
so what happened? Obviously, you got published.
I got pissed off, and I just kept going. And I just kept writing and editing, and I sent a couple versions of the manuscript to you. You said it was too long. I didn't agree. I sent it to a couple of agents.
We're still on speaking terms. That's encouraging.
Yes, I sent it to a couple of agents. They said it's too long. You know, I think it was 174,000 words when it was done.
Too long. It's too long.
Too long. And they're looking for 85,000. I said, I can't tell this story in 85,000 words. It's like, it was just crazy. You know, can you name this note in two, you know, name this song in 2 notes? And anyway, then I started looking for the self-publishing independent route, and I settled in on a very old company, Durant's. Not the best result for me, because they handle a lot of volume, handle a lot of books, and you know, I like to be on top of things. I don't like to wait for people.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a schedule, and I expect everybody else to be on a schedule, and that's not how it works.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been, give you a perfect example, fulfilling the books. You get to this spot and you run right into a pandemic, supply
Oh,
chain,
that. Yeah. Oh, that.
supply chain issues. And the most bizarre thing was ink. I said, ink? What do you mean ink? We're having to ration ink because the ink orders that we made a year and a half ago are sitting in Long Beach Harbor on a container. So if you are a nobody, you go to the bottom of the list. So I just kept pushing. And that I attributed to the rejection that I had received as a trial lawyer. I mean, you get rejected every day for something. And you just have to carry on and finish. The big goal for me was finishing, to get it in print, and then to see what the marketing does.
And it's too soon to tell on that, right?
It's too soon to tell. I mean, we hit number 1 and number 2 on 2 key metrics on the Kindle store last week: religious mysteries and corruption and politics. And that was behind Jonathan Karl's book. So I felt that was probably the more significant metric, because that was a first-rate publisher, first-tier publisher with a known commodity and so forth. So, but you're right, it's too early to tell. And I'm getting a lesson on marketing, about what it takes to market a book.
And as I remember, one of the things I talk about in my writing workshops is the marketing process, because that's probably one of the biggest surprises that wannabe authors have, is that, they think once their book is in print, the publisher's going to pay for their cross-country book tour, and those days are over unless you're John and you don't need it. Has that been a real, I don't know, wake-up call and disappointment, or what?
No, not really. I kind of knew about it. I'd done quite a bit of research on it. Talking to you was really helpful. And I just decided the book was going to have a website, was going to have a significant website. I built websites for my law firm before, so I knew what was involved there. And what I didn't do, because I just refused to, but I found somebody that would do it for me: social media. I don't know TikTok or Instagram or Facebook or any of that stuff, but this book is out there on all of those platforms. And I retained a publicist that had skills in that area, and she's getting it out. She asked me what I want to say. I write it up for her, and she gets it into the format that these platforms use. And so we'll see. I mean, we've got a lot of requests out for appearances at bookstores, particularly independents, because I think independents will be attracted to this type of book. And with my background and my ability to speak to, a global issue that's occurring, that's still occurring. I mean, the different areas of the world are going through this process that we went through from the 80s until the present. And some of them are ahead of us, some of them are way behind us.
So what's next? Has this whole process whetted your appetite, and so now you've got a gazillion books and just waiting for you to write, or what's happening now?
Well, without giving too much of it away, there is a next with this group of characters, and it does involve a restructuring of what we know in religion based on governmental oversight of criminal behavior and nonprofit organizations. So I won't say too much more about that.
So
But
what you're doing is you're taking the characters that are in active faith and moving them forward.
and moving it. I didn't know whether I had the stomach to do this again. And
I know the feeling, man. I know the feeling.
I still maintain a practice, and I do quite a bit of consulting. But I deliberately ended it in 1994, right after the first racketeering case was settled, because a lot has happened since 1994 and 2021. And you very well may see my prognostication about where this is going to end.
Let me ask you this. Obviously, we've plowed a lot of ground here, and it's entirely possible that someone who is watching has been abused by a priest and may want to reach out to you. Are you still litigating those kind of cases?
I have a relationship. I'm of counsel with a firm that specializes in this. So the short answer is yes.
Okay, I've got your email address up there, and it's obviously it's not case sensitive. Emails aren't case sensitive, but I think this is the email that people can use to contact you if they want to do something. scr@stephenrubino.com.
Correct.
And the book website is actoffaith.com. Again, websites aren't case sensitive, so I've done it this way so that you can see the differentiation of the words in there.
Yeah, activefaithbook.com.
Activefaithbook.com. And Stephen Rubino is the author of Active Faith. Any final thoughts before we move on? I certainly hope I get a chance to interview you again when the next book comes out.
No,
in about 5 years from now.
Yeah. I think I might be able to do it a little quicker this time because of how many characters I know about and I've lived with.
How far into it are you in the writing?
I'm not into the writing at all, but I'm pretty well into the outline about the arc of the story itself and what happens to people.
And at what point do you see yourself actually writing the first draft?
Oh, probably this year or 2022.
Okay, excellent. Well, the book is Active Faith. The author is Stephen Rubino. I'm John DeDakis. You've been one-to-one with me and Steve. And Steve, thanks. This has been so much fun.
It has been. I enjoyed it.
In spite of the difficult topic that we've been discussing, but you're a breath of fresh air to be able to not only make history in going after the Catholic Church and making and bringing about some justice, but I appreciate that you've shared your own faith and lack of faith journey, and that we have really have more books to look forward to in your arsenal. So
there you go.
To be continued, sir. Okay.
All right. Take care.
You bet. Bye.
Bye.